it's recording. Hi, Sachin.
Hey, Dinkar.
Yeah. So one thing that we discussed a bit in the previous conversation, and I want to spend some more time is hashtag lifestack, and
Okay.
hopefully I'll use this video recording, post it here and there, and I want to pose this question to other people: what does your life stack look like? And before we jump into that, probably as an example, what does life stack mean, and what do I mean by it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So see, we are using tech everywhere, right? And
Right.
tech has become very important part of our personal lives also, right?
True.
And depending on our interest and everything, we've started using these products. And at our age, we have settled on some stack, so as to say, right? So products have tech stacks. In workplaces, we have tech stacks, but I'm thinking of life stack. And give you an example, for me, it's not a very geeky life stack. It's a very basic one. A very important part of my life stack is a dream host.
Okay.
That's where my blog, all my possible startup ideas. In fact, my startup also kind of grew. So I host a lot of things there. And what that also gives me, it gives me a play area that I have a hosted server somewhere, and I try a lot of things there. And I actually recommend it to a lot of product managers who come and talk to me, like get some space, put things out there, create something, show it to people, get expose yourself to unsolicited advice and even something very critical. So on top of it, one, I'm running this Dinkar, DDIINNXX.com, Dinks, done double, which is my blog in which I mostly am doing product management. It's again a WordPress thing, very convenient. But what it has allowed me to do is experiment with, like I have this support me by paying something. So I got an opportunity to try how small entrepreneurs um, can insert payments, contact forms, a lot of things. So that's a very important part of my life stack. On the other hand, for my work and productivity and personal sanity, I have kind of arrived at this Apple ecosystem, right? Me and my family, we share photographs, documents. Like these days, wherever you go, you need to show your vaccination, second dose certificate, right? So we have a shared folder where everyone's is there. So like when my parents are going with me, I'll show theirs. When they're going with my brother, he'll show theirs. So we have these shared documents, everything happening. And I had like some 20, 30K photographs. I don't know how many, not 20, 30K, but a large set, right? I kind of dumped all of them into iCloud, and it did a lot of nice processing. It took care of the geography, it took care of the dates. Surprisingly, it got a lot of things accurately. Surprised me with some old photographs also. But that Apple stack is very there, and little bit on Google, but mostly on Apple. And on the work side, we discussed this last time a bit. I still want pen and paper. I still want the indulgence of writing something when you cannot multitask. Your eyes, your hand, everything is on that piece of paper, and you're focusing on what you're writing. You're kind of organizing your thoughts. So I make a lot of lists on my notebook. I do a lot of first level drawing on my notebook, and my hand drawings are done on iPad and good notes. I use good notes a lot. In fact, my next sci-fi book, all the artwork that I have done myself, and I've done using good notes on it. So that's my life stack. I know yours is a little more interesting. So yeah, tell us about
I
yours.
think, yeah. And Dinkar, while you were talking about it, I was also making note of, because what you just made me aware is life stack is not just about the earlier, before like getting into this call, I was thinking about lifestyle is all about only things which make my work life easy, right?
Hmm.
Something. And the boundary I just kept expanding as you were speaking, and I realized that I have so many more tools which actually help me organize my life. And I also like this word you coined, or I don't know whether it is coined earlier, but I heard it from you. So for me, this is like very novel word. Life stack is,
Life stack.
yes, I
I
haven't.
think I came up with it, I believe. But
Fantastic.
we'll see.
So yeah,
Internet will put us in our place. Hmm.
yeah. So hashtag life stack, right? So I found that there are so many things which I use and pretty much everybody has figured out. And there is no right or wrong, but what is important is what is a stack which you are comfortable with.
Hmm.
And most of the time it is just habit thing. Like I have gotten used to using Chrome in a certain fashion,
Yeah.
or I have configured my one password in certain way. Now I use it that for that purpose.
Hmm.
I have a place for Dropbox still in my life. I have a place for GitHub in my life. So
Yeah.
let's go one by one, right? So let's think about our email. So I also have a Gmail workspaces account, which I
Hmm.
have for my own domain, dharmapurikar.in, and I use that because my surname is so long. It is a chore to type in every time my full email address every time. So I have like very small email address now with my domain, and that is hosted on Google, and that is used everywhere as OAuth. So that just made my life much easier to remember passwords.
Hmm.
And early on, almost like 10 years ago, I went on a spree that I I thought to myself that I'm not going to have weak passwords. So
Hmm.
I went invested into one password at that time. And before my company started offering one password as a free offering
Hey,
license,
you
right?
seem to work for a cool company. They just give
Yeah.
you licenses like this.
Yeah, but I think every company should think about it. One password or some other tool which allows you to keep your passwords safe. And even if, let's say, your company is not providing it, it's worth buying it. It's not that expensive, but it provides you so many things. And I'll give you a hack in a minute, which will make it worthwhile to actually invest, even if you don't get a license from your company. So,
But Sachin, on a diagram, I realized something. We are using this. We are using one HR third-party tool,
yes,
and that tool has actually worked. So these password remembering doesn't work on that. I
yes.
am shocked. Remember, I use Chrome's remember, right? It does not remember. They have done thing in code reader. I just why would they do that? They're actually forcing someone to write password. They're not allowing this one password kind of. It's very surprising. I won't name them, but
Yeah,
it
but
seems to
there
be
are
some
these
weird
companies.
security thing.
Yeah, and HDFC is largest private bank in India, right?
Yeah,
And they allow you to copy and paste password.
yeah.
But if you think about some of the public sector banks, they are much smaller in size.
As if
Uh,
pasting password is some like hack. Like I
yeah,
don't get this.
and Dinkar, it is so hard to actually take the money out, which is your own money. Just think about like going back to our last week's conversation, right? Why somebody would like to go and bank with a company where it is so difficult to operate.
Yeah.
Security should not be friction.
Yes.
Security should be frictionless. And all these old thought processes of these public sector banks is that make it so hard that nobody would like to take the money out, or that is the most secure. If people are
Don't
having
interact. That means there's no risk. Yeah.
correct. And I think that thinking has to adapt,
Yeah.
because nowadays nobody wants friction. So going back to that one password thing,
Yeah.
so quickly I want to highlight, me and my wife always used to talk about, there are so many places where we have our financial resources, right?
Right.
It could be mutual funds, it could be bank accounts, it could be credit card, debit cards.
Yeah.
I mean, like, just imagine that you are traveling and to overseas vacation, and suddenly you lose your wallet.
Yeah.
Now, getting those all credit card numbers or what you were carrying with you, it is going to be a difficult for you. So I use one password to store that as a secure note,
Hmm.
and it has a feature for that. And my wife knows that all my passwords, and we both share the vault. So she
Yeah.
knows that if, let's say, she needs to access certain financial information when I'm not accessible or I'm not around, so it will be very easy for them to
Yes.
access that information. So use this thing. It's a hack, but if you configure it well, you
Hmm.
can actually utilize it in a very different way, apart
Hmm.
from just like using it for securing typical passwords. Just like you are hacking your Google Photos for vaccination certificate, quick access, right? I
Hey,
have that.
not Google Photos, iPhotos. This
iPhotos,
is
yes.
Apple ecosystem.
That's good segue. I moved to Google Photos completely
Okay.
when the bandwagon was there about free photos, right? There is
Hmm.
one very cool feature of Google Photos which is not in Apple Photos, and me and my wife both share our full libraries with each other. So
Hmm.
entire photos libraries. The one thing which I always wanted to have is, if my wife used to take massive amount of photos of my daughter when she was around, because she
Uh,
was always with her. So
that's
she
me in
used,
our family. Yeah.
yes, and she used to take like really cool pictures, and those pictures were not copied into my library.
Hmm.
And before Google Photos, those photos used to get lost, but
Yeah.
I wanted those photos in my library. So Google has this feature where you can tag a person and you say, from her library, whenever new photos are added of certain people, copy them
Hmm.
over to my library automatically.
Okay. Yeah.
And that allows me to always have photos of my wife, my daughter, and my mother, my brothers, and like a few
Yeah.
close relatives. They keep copied onto my library, even if they are taken by her camera.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very cool, cool way of not only sharing, but my library keeps expanding without taking photos.
Right.
Um, and I use Google Photos, and it is compatible with our phones. It automatically backs up from iPhotos, so that way you need to just store the photos in one place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, they are very optimally stored. So the cost of storage is very similar between Apple and Google, but because of this encryption algorithm, the actual storage requirements of Google are far lesser than Apple, is what I have found.
Mhm.
Obviously, some geek will actually challenge me on that. So, but yeah, in my experience, your mileage may vary.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that brings to the other point is about how all these things tie together, right? The device ecosystem, I predominantly chose Apple again because tight integrations ecosystem is well, and I have invested in certain apps on
Mm.
Apple which were paid, so it makes sense for me to keep using them because some of them are perpetually licensed, they are not subscription oriented apps. And now I'm finding that going to Windows, although I'm liking Windows a lot, this Windows 11 looks very cool. And by the way, one of the laptops which I have in my house has the best keyboard, and it is a Windows laptop.
Mhm.
It's a ThinkPad,
Okay.
and
I think that still has that mechanical keyboard aspect in it.
I don't
Is
think it is a
that the kind of
mechanical
keyboard
keyboard.
you
It is
have, or
still,
it is
no, it is still a membrane keyboard.
okay?
But I think there's just the ThinkPads always.
Is one of those carbon ones or yoga?
No, it's just a standard ThinkPad,
Okay.
some
Okay.
T series
Yeah.
laptop. But I do like their feel of keys.
Mm.
MacBooks, in the interest of becoming thinner, they adopted these very low travel mechanism. If you remember,
Mm.
Dinkar, prior to 2015, they had these really awesome keyboards,
Mm.
which had massive travel up and down. It was a pleasure to type on those keyboards, but now I have two MacBook Pros, but I don't enjoy typing on them.
Hmm.
They are
You know
good.
what I find very irritating, the edge is so sharp. I sometimes kind of scratch I just want to, it's the laptop I'm using is from work, so I cannot do that. But if it was mine, I would have bought a file and smoothened the edges. If the Pro has this very sharp edge, find it
Yeah,
very,
I mean, I get it. Uh, the uh, hey, the edges in terms of new Apple ones, particularly the latest one which came Pro one, it is now much smoother,
okay.
and it is also thicker laptop now compared to the old ones.
Yeah. Let me check which one I have. I mean, it's MacBook Pro, but this is still, yeah, the processor is still Intel. So yeah, it's not the new one. Yeah.
Yeah, the new one which Pro latest came,
Yeah.
I think last
Which
year.
with the Apple's own processors.
Correct, and that is little thicker one now, and
Okay.
that is little old school design as well, rather than
Hmm.
the unibody which was like thinner and thinner and thinner.
Yeah.
It's much better. I haven't used the keyboard too much, but I like the Windows keyboard a lot now. So
Not actually Windows keyboard. Like it's the Lenovo keyboard.
the
Yeah.
ThinkPad keyboard, again,
Yeah, ThinkPad.
specifically
I
ThinkPad keyboard.
I personally had. I mean, if whenever I have had Windows, for a short period I had Dell many years back, and I have always liked, to be honest, Lenovo. The Windows laptop I have, which I have to use sometimes for work, is also from Lenovo. They're good. The first time I started using Mac was way back when it was a PowerPC laptop, and I was doing embedded program for PowerPC, so it was very convenient for me to have a native compiler there, and I could look at compile and look at the assembly and kind of cheat code from there.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Hey Dinkar, since we are already on a digression, a sub digression wouldn't hurt. Are you sucker for these laptops which actually have really good typing keyboards? I mean, like, do you consider a keyboard as one of the most
No,
important features of laptop?
no,
Okay.
no. It just shouldn't hurt my wrist. That's all I care about. That's why I don't want wear watches. Also, it feels my biggest thing with laptop is the pointing, because I do a lot of drag and drop. I do a lot of artwork kind of thing. I mean, my
Understood.
daughter sometimes says my job is to do doodling, right? Because you've seen some of my output, right? There will always be some image or some graphical representation. So I do a lot of drag and drop. So my is the mouse should be actually
Really
very,
good one.
yes, yeah.
I get it. I get it. In fact, 10 years ago, Apple had a trackpad, which is still better than the ThinkPad's trackpad today. And modern Apple trackpad is just next level. I mean, I haven't seen any other laptop other than Apple, which comes even close to in terms of trackpad sensitivity. In fact, the feature, all of it, it's a package is fantastic. So, getting back into the whole life stack on
Talk back
Apple.
the stack so we come back. Yeah.
Yes. So the stack wise, I think I'm using now Apple Mail things, and for note taking,
Hmm.
I use variety of tools, but we'll talk about note taking just simply. There are two main things. One is physical notebook. I still am a big fan of physical notebooks. I like to
Good
type
job.
things because, and the reason being is very simple. We have moved to all this remote work, right? And if
Mhm.
I'm typing, people don't know whether I'm chatting with somebody else, I'm actually drafting an email, I'm multitasking,
Yeah,
and I don't want other people to be puzzled that what am I doing.
yeah,
But
yeah.
when I'm actually putting my head down and writing with pen, it
It's
means,
obvious that you are making notes. Yeah.
and they also know the in the conversation which they are having, they know that something important was said. And if I'm scribbling right after that, that means I'm actually taking notes, and
So
I'm not
Sachin,
actually.
in our office conversations, if you're not putting your head down or noting something, I should take a message that nothing
Yeah,
important was said by me.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's I'm just giving you away my tips right now. So yeah, whoever actually listens to this call, they should know that okay, if I'm not writing, that means Nothing important happened.
I
So
want to tag some of my colleagues at this point. I'll do that internally.
yeah, and I think that let's focus a little bit more on things plus mail combination.
Yeah.
One of the biggest problem of our life, or at least like for last 5 years, I have been doing is I used to always have these things which used to fall through cracks.
Hmm.
That means I had 10, 15 small activities I was supposed to do, and some of them used to be time dependent. That means I needed to do something on Tuesday, but I needed to meet somebody, and somebody was not available. So I need to do that now on Thursday. So up to that point, I have made a note. I have written it onto some to-do list, and
Hmm.
now Tuesday that didn't happen. Now it is pushed to Friday. Somehow the transition of that particular activity falls through crack, and on Friday I am not taking care of it.
Right.
And when this keeps happening again and again, essentially it used to bother me a lot that uh, even though it is a very minuscule thing, it was not acceptable.
Hmm.
And as I kept progressing in my career, I figured out many emails which actually come our way, they have a certain associated action item.
Hmm.
And you want to actually go back and then talk about that email after a certain period of time.
It's
And
such a minor digression. Do you feel in your startup world when you were co-founding and
yeah,
compared to when you're working, these kind of emails happen more in working corporate world or in startup world? My
it's
experience is happening more in the corporate world than in startup world somehow.
in my case, it was both, and the reason being is uh, all the notifications. If you use Jira, they come onto email as well. Lot of activities actually come as notification on email, and people. At least I, when I was in startup between 2011 and 19, we used to drive a lot of our activities via email.
Hmm.
Example would be is if we are actually collecting some data from our customers, and
Mhm.
customer is sending some implementation information, or
Yeah.
disable this account, enable this
Yeah.
account, or some customer support tickets. I needed to take certain activities. So the ticket was not resolved immediately, but it was resolved after 2 days. And all of this didn't used to flow through software like Zendesk. So it was important. So it was very critical that we were on top of our email game.
Hmm.
And also, I am that way very strict about zero inbox policy,
Hmm.
and I never have. I mean, like even
Same.
now, if yeah, and sometimes people share screen and they have like 10,563 unread emails.
Right.
It's just like
Right.
I just
Yeah.
cringe.
What
Uh,
happened, right?
I don't know. I mean, like how they sleep at night
Yeah,
when,
yeah. No. Yeah.
uh, and that's why what I started doing is I started adding these emails to my to-do list.
Hmm.
This is where I found out the problem of physical paper-based to-do list is that you need to type the pointer to that email.
Hmm.
And how do you do that? Like a search term or a
Yeah.
special folder. So what I realize is that the successful workflow will need to have a single place where all the activities gather. Whether
Hmm.
this is your personal, you need to pay your daughter's
Yeah.
school fees, or get a book new like gas cylinder, or even like respond to a very critical email from customer, right? All of these things needs to be in perspective. You may
Yeah.
choose to do during work period to focus on only work related activities, and during weekend you would like to focus on your errands, but if they are in one place, then you can take a stock of all stuff.
Right.
So what I started doing is I started using Things, which is a software based on Mac and iPhone, for collecting all my activities. And emails, it has a very nifty feature that you can drag and drop an email from Apple Mail client, and it creates hyperlink
To
for
exact email.
to the exact email. And even if it is a multi-threaded conversation, it actually picks that latest conversation. So whenever you are, no matter on what device, you could be on your iPad, you could be on your
Mm.
phone, you could be on your laptop, you click onto the to-do task, it will have a hyperlink which will go back to the a deep link to that email.
Right.
And I found that was the most important feature. So it is always in context, and it just like started happening very nicely.
Right.
And things also allow you to associate a date, and if that didn't happen on that date, I can assign a new date to it.
Right.
So that's why now I'm giving away secret. Many of my colleagues sometimes wonder how he's like
Yeah,
referring
yeah.
to a
I've received those emails. Yeah, yeah.
I have gone back to email which was sent 6 weeks ago, and I'm saying, hey, what happened to this?
Right.
Because I have been I have been waiting for some people to take action, and
Right.
I typically push anything not more than a week.
Right.
So if I have waited for 6 weeks, that means I have revisited that task at least 6 to 7 times.
Yeah.
So that allows you to distill your thought process and also discard ruthlessly. If certain task is not applicable anymore, just delete it.
Mm.
Sometimes it is daunting. You will see that there are 29 activities to be done today,
Mm.
and it is impossible. But spending 5 minutes, you can realize, oh, these four things are not going to happen today. So I'm going to push it out by, let's say, 4 days. So
You generously move thing forward. You don't try to do it as you don't push yourself to cover most, but you
yes,
push yourself to cover few important ones, and rest you feel comfortable to push forward.
yeah. So my method is that do not get overwhelmed by it, number which is activities you need to do today. But what you try to do is that figure out what are the most important one you
Right.
can focus today.
Yeah.
So pick 2 or 3 for the day. Focus on those. Rest everything moves out to a later date. Is it
Yeah.
today, tomorrow, or sometime later in the day? Uh, but most important, like always, uh, priority is to not lose tasks rather than completing it today.
Okay. Yeah.
So
That's an
um,
important.
right. So if you are actually having activities which you will revisit tomorrow, that's fine. But many times I also know that I need to do this today. There is a presentation tomorrow. I need to figure it out. I need to finish it off.
What
So
was the granularity? What is the fidelity of each task? Like a task could be composed of, reply to this email after 5 days. Like uh, in your mind, what is that quanta of work that you classify, or there is nothing like that? If it
oh no no
could
no,
be
Dinkar,
one
this
second,
is
it could be 2 days.
oh this is brilliant. This is brilliant. I do have that granularity.
Okay.
So there was this fella whom I used to work with, and he introduced me to a system called Pomodoro,
Hmm.
and it's Japanese method, Japanese culture, and Pomodoro is a technique. I don't quote me on this, but I do believe it is a Japanese origin.
Yeah.
And the funda is that anytime you want to actually achieve a task,
Hmm.
we can only focus for certain period of time in a
Yeah.
go, in a stretch. So what they have is they have these 20-minute pomodoros which are most popularly used. So the
Hmm.
idea is that pomodoro is a kitchen timer in the shape of a tomato, and pomodoro is the word for that. And what you start is a timer of 20 minutes, and
Hmm.
then you a task, whatever you want to do, should be 20-minute long max.
Hmm. Interesting.
So the goal is that you start a Pomodoro,
Hmm.
and there are a lot of free apps. I use some on my phone. There are apps available for Mac which are free, which will start from my taskbar as well. So when you start a Pomodoro timer, you set it for 20 minutes, and then you take mandatory 5-minute break.
Hmm.
And the break consists of like doing anything, but doing the continuation of activity which you were doing earlier.
Yeah.
So let's say you decided to give 20 minutes to clear your inbox.
Okay.
Now
That's
you do
interesting.
that.
I'll give this a try.
Yeah.
But I think I so Pomodoro is an Italian term, so just FII.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
No
Yeah.
issues. Yeah. The
Does
other
it have
thing
any
is,
Japanese origin though?
Yeah. See, for me, I'm that flow thing works a lot. Like while for certain, so I get the importance of doing this 25 minutes, especially if there is a risk of losing attention. But a few days back, you asked me, I did a bunch of stuff in one day, and you were asking how I was able to
Yeah,
do it. There were very few interrupts that day in meetings and everything, and I was quote unquote in the flow thought process, and I was able to accomplish all that. There's actually some book also on this flow. Somewhere. See, the thing is,
projects to product to projects or projects to products, something like that, right?
no, not that. Yeah. I have a big gripe on that topic. Maybe someday we should discuss that. I know this is like just the flow. You're in a, it's a state of mind flow, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things we experience, but then someone gives it a label and writes a book, then it becomes a thing. So it feels like to me it's one of those things. Anyway, so yeah, so this Pomodoro sounds like a very interesting technique.
Yeah,
I'll
it's
give
not
this.
Japanese, by the way. It's Italian. You are right,
Sure.
and the origin is also Italian. So thank you
Yeah,
so much for correcting. So,
no
folks,
issue.
if you were
People,
listening, it was not
people
Japanese.
who created it, Francisco, I'll just leave it at that. Our apology.
Correct. But it works beautifully. So a task which the granularity is, it should be possible to do in a Pomodoro cycle.
Hmm.
Um, but let's say that I need to create a presentation, and that presentation has 5 pieces.
Hmm.
Let's say there are some slides or some diagrams. I need to collect certain data. Typically, I come to you for some structure, a
Hmm.
table, or some thought process, right? So when I do that, I actually create a project in things for that, a
Okay.
project with a deadline.
Hmm.
And let's say the deadline, the presentation is next Friday. I set a deadline of Wednesday or Thursday morning.
Hmm.
And what I do is I break these into smaller tasks.
Hmm.
There are two reasons for that. One, um, it bugs me a lot when there is a task which is never ending.
Hmm.
It just like I have to keep track, because things also has a checklist feature within a task that you can
Life
actually
of
have. Correct. Now
uh,
you can have a checklist. So, but then these type of tasks never get over.
yeah, yeah,
They have these 15 things, unless these are like literally 5 6 second activities.
yeah.
I wouldn't use it. I have rarely found use for checklist within a task,
Hmm.
but I find a good use for projects. So, and when I have a presentation, and for that I need to do so many activities, I create each task,
Okay,
and then I cross off. And it has the first reason, it is it ends, it's a finite, it's a bite-sized task.
yeah,
And
yeah,
second is also psychological. It's like that sense of accomplishment.
yeah.
So if I have like 20 tasks and I keep moving, it just feels much better that way.
Yeah. So, so your key part of this life stack that you called out is this things plus mail, right?
Yeah.
This loop that you have. A little bit of leading question, but you have also been using another technique, Zettelkasten.
Yeah, but that's for knowledge. Yes, and
Yeah,
that
knowledge
gets us
management.
into,
Yeah.
yeah, and that gets into our learning slash knowledge. And the way you use DreamHost, I use GitHub plus Docker containers basically.
Where do you
Um,
host them?
I
Like,
don't
do you ever open to public?
know. The beauty is this, Dinkar, if most of the learnings which I do from Udemy courses, or let's say I want to learn some data science, I have to code, and luckily GitHub now allows you to have unlimited private repositories. So what I
Hmm.
do is that I actually create repository for each Udemy course, and
Okay.
I start checking in my code there. But the beauty is, whatever you code, you can spin off and recreate the whole environment using containers in no time.
Okay.
So that way, I don't need to host. It's mostly for myself. But if I need to host, I started using Linode many years ago, and that worked really well for me.
Sure.
Now, if I want to use something permanent, I would use AWS though.
Sure. Yeah.
And my learning stack would be is for business knowledge, I have HBR subscription, which is actually fantastic. Anybody who wants to actually go and get some because it allows me to get a lot of research done. I
Yeah.
also have ACM O'Reilly, so they allow me to get a lot of technical
Uh,
and business
I
data.
think it's very important in today's career to, especially if you're in technology, to understand have a deep understanding of business world and how things. It's the more techy you are, the deeper you need to understand the business.
Correct. And I think that is a very vital advice. If you want to take anything out of this call, I think, Dinkar, what you just said is very important because it has very deep repercussions on your career and how you see business. When 15
Also,
years
how
ago,
good you do technology, right?
yes,
It's a purposeful technology that's towards some outcome, and not just right, yeah.
right. And for that, the I think in my mind, how I interpret your that statement is uh, many times you and I have these working sessions and
Yeah,
debate. But what I see is that you need to understand what your customer wants,
right.
and to understand, it's one thing to say that it's so simple, right? Just
Yeah.
know what your customer wants, but
Make
to
a website.
understand, yeah, but to understand what your customer wants, you need to also understand their business really well
Yeah,
and where are they coming from.
yeah,
For example, recent geopolitical crisis,
right.
how different businesses are dependent upon Ukraine and Russia. If you do understand that and
Yeah,
how business logistics works today, you will realize how people are concerned about certain undercurrents.
right.
And if you are able to identify that trend and put it in perspective, that would actually make you a really good uh, techie.
Yes.
So, and the whole world, Dinkar, I mean, whether it is full stack developers or DevOps, where developers were supposed to do the ops thing themselves. If
Mm.
you have built it, you also manage it. You
Yeah,
have built it, you also deploy it, right?
yeah,
The same philosophy. Now, the boundaries between business and technology, particularly for technology businesses, right, which
yeah,
we are in, these lines are getting blurred day by day.
yeah.
So you can have a strong bias towards technology, but you cannot be completely oblivious to business.
You built it. Now you're responsible for the ensuring that it makes money. Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. It's I would say that full stack technologist, right?
This is the real full stack, right? Fuller stack.
Fuller
Uh,
stack, yes.
yeah, and as a founder, you do that naturally. But I think it's becoming a regular expectation in any organization. If you're a architect or some any senior, if a senior or a lead uh, gets a prepended, prefix to your role, that means you have to think about this. You're responsible for this. Yeah.
Yeah, and when I was young, then also I understood, Dinkar, that having this business understanding sets you way into different league compared to your peers.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's a very valuable skill to acquire when you are even
You,
junior.
you were always smart even when you were young. Yes, we get it. Yeah, we hear you.
So yeah, okay, shameless. Uh, so now that comes that learning, right? So what I have found, Dinkar, is that another pet peeve of mine has been where to put this knowledge.
Hmm.
And I was constantly searching for a long period of time is a method which I wanted to uh, and okay, let me back up. Since I am in technology, I have to learn a lot of things. I have to be abreast about so many things. But the biggest challenge is that I'm an applied, and last time also we spoke, we are applied engineers, right? I have to take this knowledge and apply it somewhere. I have to create cross connections. And when you want to do this, what I have always found problem is that the knowledge is very volatile,
Hmm.
and programming is a particularly very perishable skill. If I learn Golang as spur of the moment for 15 days, I understood data structures, everything, control structures. I know Golang now, and I have practiced a bit of programs from Udemy as well. But if I don't use it for next 6 months in a real life project, I
Hmm.
will definitely
Gone.
forget it.
Yeah.
So for programming, this may not work, what I'm going to talk to you, but it works for concepts and building knowledge out of it.
Right.
So Last few months ago, I came across this method called Zettelkasten. And Zettelkasten is a German term for slip box.
Mhm.
And by the way, this is a system which is digital and analog friendly.
Yeah.
Original Zettelkasten system was only slip box. So people used to write notes and they used to store it into a slip box. So Dinkar, I mean, it might be very useful for you as well if you don't use the digital version. But what I use for that is Obsidian, and I have started following it very aggressively. So um, the concept goes in brief, but obviously people can go at any level, and I'll quickly show my second brain, which is people call second brain for things which are related to this Zettelkasten basically, or Obsidian, where they put all the knowledge. The idea is, in a nutshell, there are three types of notes you want to gather. One are
Mm.
fleeting notes, and the fleeting notes are typically the places where you gather these notes or pieces of knowledge. For example, Pomodoro, which
Yeah.
you heard for today for the first time, I heard for Lifestack. And what I will do is I'll start collecting information. So my can I share my screen now?
Yeah.
Here, if you see my structure, it's very simple. My knowledge base is about fleeting notes, which is my very temporary structure. So you see, the note is very small, and
Mm.
it is about bridge to nowhere. And the concept is about what is bridge to nowhere. And I wrote only 2 bullet points about it, and the source where I collected this knowledge from. Sometimes it could be an article online, or it could be a conversation. So I'll actually put
Yeah.
reference there, and I put a date. And there is no predefined structure for any of this. This is my structure.
Right.
And when you
So
write
there is a
this,
recommended structure. This fleeting note, everything is a recommended structure.
the fleeting note, literature note, and permanent note, these are the three I borrowed from original Zettelkasten. The index note, keyword notes, projects, and templates, I borrowed it from some YouTuber. I forgot his name, but
Right.
I like this structure and I copied it directly.
Sure.
And the idea is that fleeting notes should be small. So, for example, here I read one article and I would like to write about these 4 bullet points.
Yeah.
Um, I like this quote a lot about delusional optimism of startup founders, and I actually wrote an article on LinkedIn about this.
Yeah.
So uh, when you are reading, this is actually coming from two set of articles and quotes. What I found is that this was very contrasting. On one side, you want these startup founders to be delusional, because if you started taking uh, status quo as reality and limits, then you will never be able to innovate and challenge today's status quo. But if you think about delusional optimism into enterprise leaders, then you will be taking risks which are just not supposed to be taken.
It
So
reminds me of a quote. I don't know, something like that. Reasonable people never change the world, or unreasonable people change the world, something like that. Yeah.
now that would be a fleeting note, Dinger, what you just said.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Which you
you will,
will tag to this thought process, and then you have added
correct.
to.
Now it will go to that. Uh, and then the idea is that as soon as, and I put dates, as soon as you create these notes, you should actually reasonably soon, you should put that into a literature note
Right.
and move it into literature note. So whenever you put it into literature note, the idea is that, for example, delusional, I showed you one delusional
Right.
optimism with business executives. There is a corresponding um, now literature note. And this
Yeah.
literature note is about my take on this.
Hmm.
And I am supposed to now put in not just copy pasted material from internet,
Yeah.
but what is my thought on this? And I should type it in here. Once
Yeah.
I type it in here, this allows you to basically just concretize that idea. And this may take 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but now I have this very concrete idea about how this is going to move.
Right.
And then once you have a lot of literature notes, you can create a permanent note. And the
Yeah.
permanent note could be is this article, which I had. And here I am maybe taking multiple literature notes, which are coming together for writing this permanent note. And the idea about this permanent note is now that it is much more refined in my thought process. It has some original ideas coming from me, and it is originated from some uh, different ideas coming from internet conversations, books, blogs, you may say whatever, right? But the beauty is, this is how my whole small article works. I mean, like, I'm showing you a very small subset of my whole stuff. For example, product management, there are few articles which I have or thoughts I have around product management. And there are some related to business value, and there are some related to productivity, but I haven't written or collected a lot of data about productivity. So this is how the knowledge graph is for me.
Yeah. This reminds me of Neo4j, though.
This is similar to that.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is nothing but graph
It's a
representation of
graph,
data.
but the animation and the physics of it reminds me of that. Yeah.
Correct. You are absolutely right. And the idea is that you create these index notes, which I don't have, is if you have a lot of topic about product management and you want to create a specific index for those topics, you can actually do that. Or for a keyword, you can create a card which is giving the map of that keyword. Sometimes I work on some projects, so I will have one project and related to that, all the information and some template. So for example, this is my template. So if I want to write a note, I can actually just create a note right here. So you can just like create a note.
While you're doing that, I noticed just because you pulled up notes on product management, I think I want to talk to you about product management in some research, maybe next conversation,
Sure.
especially how you see as a developer product management today. I have some pet peeves of how it is shaping up as it is getting commoditized as a role. I
Absolutely.
fear some. One thing that Sachin, I do, I don't know how. So part of this method is also digesting the information, right?
Yes.
So I read a lot of science papers. I'm very much interested in physics, high energy physics, because of exposure I got to it at Fermi Lab and CERN. And one of the ways I try to make sense of this is I try to imagine a story around it, right? So for example, there's this whole, so for example, something that recently I kind of, two, three things I put together, right? As I was digesting, as you said, right? All these things come together and take a shape, right? There was one thing I've always been fascinated about, the event horizon concept in a black hole. Also that, the quantum state is always conserved in nature, right? So when something falls into a black hole, because quantum state is always, quantum information is always conserved, it it doesn't get destroyed, it stays somewhere
Mm-hmm.
as the in the black hole things. So and maybe it stays at the event horizon, that's where probably it gets saved. And there were a lot of these concepts coming together, and then I thought that, okay, if I jump into a black hole and in a recording or as is, or a copy of all of my quantum information is there, and quantum, because it's all matter and everything, probably memory and everything is also there, right? So in future, if I have a ability to extract that, I could clone myself, right? So then it kind of took shape of a story. But one of the things that, as you were talking about, I was also thinking that how do I put things together? For me, even work related stuff, right? When I we talk about something, we talk about some, right? the way I kind of put all this together in my mind is in form of a story. I haven't really thought enough about it. It's been a natural way of doing that. I haven't thought about it enough to convert it into a framework. Maybe at some point I can do that. But it was I found words to represent how I do in the things you were talking about. So that way it was very
Dinkar,
easy.
interestingly, there are few authors who, commercial authors, by the way, they use Zettelkasten for writing their books, and they
Yeah.
use also Obsidian software for that.
Yeah. See, it reminds me. So that you probably heard about Robert Persing, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Okay, if you're
Yeah,
not,
I have
you probably
heard
heard
about the
of it.
book. Yeah,
Yeah. So he wrote another, and I'll look up. He wrote another book called Leela, in which he's on a boat and he's describing the process of writing a book. And I don't exactly remember the details of his thought process, but as you were describing it, we have talked about it, and you were describing it. It kind of reminded me. I think even he's describing something like this. He's writing all these notes. He's collecting them. He's referencing them. He's cross-referencing them. Maybe he's using something similar, exactly same. I don't recall. It's time to read that
yeah.
book.
And Dinkar, I mean, like for me, when I want to write a blog post or something like that, what challenge I feel, I mean, like I'm not as sharp mind as authors are, right? And so my, I would say, RAM of my thought process is very small.
Yeah.
So a blog post which is actually multidimensional, where you are collecting 2 3 different views and creating one blog post, and then I have trouble distilling thoughts with same potency from different areas.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe one area is now distilled enough that it is worth putting it into words.
Literal
But this,
thinking. Once
yes,
you got something, what else is around this?
right. But then what are the other parts of it? For example, let's say we are having an idea
Hmm.
and we are talking about idea. As a technologist, if you see, the titration of technical side of that idea is massive.
Hmm.
But if you ask, hey, who is going to buy this? I haven't thought a lot about it, and that is the first phrase I will say.
Yeah.
The problem is that it is not uniformly titrated,
Yes.
and to do that, what Zettelkasten allowed me to do is you have these small fleeting notes.
Hmm.
You start collecting material on that, then you start distilling them to literature note. Yet you haven't even started your blog post. So that
I think the power of this is coming through those tags and indexing, connecting.
correct,
You may have
absolutely.
forgotten that these were the fleeting knots around this, and suddenly they are back there, and it comes back to
Yes,
you.
and now I also have this important thing is that I don't have a pressure to write blog.
Yeah.
I am collecting data, so I need to think about
Blogs write
adoption,
themselves. Yeah.
right? And yes, essentially, when you want to create a permanent note, it is nothing but you start with copying and pasting multiple literature notes together,
Yeah.
paste it into this place, and then you start doing an edit of it.
Yeah.
So I thought that it allowed me to break that barrier
Yeah.
of like having a whole burden of writing multifaceted article
Yeah.
into small chunks, and now I can do this research independently and bring back that idea to the place where I want to bring at a later stage.
This was a good conversation on life stack. Will be very interesting to see what others share about their life stack.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Sachin. Have a good rest of the day,
Absolutely. Thank
and
you,
see you
Dinkar.
next time.
See you next time. Thank you.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.